Good evening, everyone. I'm Joanne Burrell, your District 3 Cobb County Commissioner, and I want to welcome you tonight and thank you and tell you how much we appreciate you being here to learn about the zoning process. A couple years ago, Commissioner Cupid instigated a seminar similar to this in her district, and it's been a couple years, and I'm the liaison commissioner for community development this year. So I got with staff and asked if we could do another one, just to kind of give everyone an overview of the zoning process, things to look for, and how you can get involved. And I'm going to turn it over. I just want to thank you all for coming and welcome you. And I'm going to turn it over to Dana Johnson, who is our Community Development Director. We also have John Peterson, who is our zoning director, with us this evening. And most of you probably know my assistant at the county, who I couldn't do anything that I do without, Inger Eberhardt. And Christy Trombetti, my District 3 Planning Commissioner, is on her way. I think she's stuck in a little bit of traffic out there. Imagine that. But I see Galt Porter is here, who is the District 4 Planning Commissioner. Galt, would you stand up? Thank you for being here, Galt. He's been through this before, so he knows probably more than I do at this point. So Dana, would you like to walk us through the process?
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm live. As the Commissioner did say, this is going to be live tonight, so I just want to make sure everybody is aware of it. A couple of ground rules before we get going. This is going to be a beginner course, kind of educating people about the zoning process so everyone can know how they can get involved in their community and how they can have an impact on kind of what's happening in their general area. We're going to get some question and answers toward the end, so if you have some questions you want to ask about, we'll go ahead and that mic will put on and we'll go ahead and answer any questions that we can. Would ask people to please speak into the microphone so everybody could hear it. Also, because this is live, we want to make sure that those who are watching will be able to hear this as well. One thing that we're not going to do today is we're not going to talk about any specific zoning cases or variance cases. Those conversations, because of state law, have to occur during a public hearing on the particular case heard in front of the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners. So we're not going to talk about any specific zoning case today. This is more of just kind of a general overview of the zoning process. And with that, I am going to jump right in. So we're going to talk about purpose today. We're going to talk about what zoning is. We're going to talk about what planning is, because they are different terms. And we're going to talk about how they work together. We're going to talk about what the Planning Commission is and Board of Zoning Appeals, what is a variance, and what is code enforcement. So let's kind of go over some of these general terms right now and kind of understand what they are. What is zoning? Zoning is land entitlement. This is your land use rights on what you can and what you can do on your property. So when you start looking at the Cobb County Zoning Code, you'll see acronyms like R20 and O&I, CRC. These are all acronyms for different zoning categories. R20 is residential, single-family residential, 20,000 square foot lot. O&I is office and institutional. CRC is community, retail, commercial. All of these are different types of zonings that have different land regulations attached to them. And the code book for Cobb County is about this thick, and about that much of it's all your zoning regulations. So it's a pretty thick read, but when you're researching stuff, it's pretty easy because you can look at things individually because they're split out by different zoning districts. Planning is a little bit different. Planning and zoning do work together, we'll get to that, but planning is more of a long-range look at where we're going as a community. It's about kind of setting a vision for Cobb County, and it kind of It establishes policies and goals and action items for the community to get to that future vision of where it is. Planning has something called future land use, and that is a policy statement versus zoning is a regulation. You have to do this, planning is a policy, so it's you should do this. So it's a very different connotation between the planning side and the zoning side. So planning, again, sets the long-term vision. It creates goals and aspirations and has a policy called future land use. Zoning has your regulation. How do they work together? In your different future land use categories, you'll have different zoning districts that may be appropriate within that particular future land use category. So we'll use low-density residential as an example. So low-density residential is a residential land use category that allows between 1 to 2.5 units per acre. Within that, you can probably do R20, you could do R15, you could do R80, which is 80,000 square foot lots. So there's all these different uses that are appropriate within that particular low-density residential category in the future land use. So that's how kind of the two of them work together to help set the framework for land regulations in Cobb County. I could ask Galt to come up to do this conversation of what the Planning Commission is. I was going to ask Christy to do these next two for us, but she's still stuck in traffic, so I'll go ahead and cover this for Christy. So the Planning Commission is an appointed board. Their main goal is to review zoning cases, special land use permit cases, and land use permit cases before they get to the Board of Commissioners for final approval. So they'll go through their public hearing process, and they'll make a recommendation. And that recommendation will come forward to the Board of Commissioners, and they'll go through it again with the whole process, which we'll talk about later on. And then the Board of Commissioners will finally make a decision. And then once that decision is made positive, then the land use regulation changes. If they deny it, then it stays the way that it is. Board of Zoning Appeals is your variance board. Your variance board does not make land use decisions as far as changes in land use. They look at varying different aspects of the land regulations themselves. So let's say Commissioner Burl and I have property next to one another, and the commissioner wants to put in an accessory structure. She wants to put a shed in her backyard. And because of the topography of her land and the way it lays, she's supposed to have it 10 feet off the property line, but she can really only do it 5 feet off the property line. Well, she would need to go and get a variance with the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the Board of Zoning Appeals would consider it, and then they would make a decision as to whether or not that would be granted or not. What makes the Board of Zoning Appeals very different from the Planning Commission is they're what's called quasi-judicial. That means that when they make a decision, it does not go to the Board of Commissioners in most cases. So if I'm an applicant and I apply for something, a variance, and I get denied, and I don't like that, because they're a quasi-judicial board, they don't go to the Board of Commissioners for remedy of their complaint. They would have to file suit in Superior Court against the county for that decision, because they are a quasi-judicial board established to review these alterations to our land use. So that's the difference between the Planning Commission and the Board of Commission, and the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals, excuse me. So I think I explained what a variance is. So I'm going to not cover that again unless somebody has a question about it. So what's code enforcement? Yes, sir.
Who are the people on the Board of Zoning Appeals? Where do they come from?
Both the Planning Commission and the Board, very good question. The question was, how do the people in the Board of Zoning Appeals get there? Just like the Planning Commission, they're appointed by the Board of Commissioners. So the Board of Commissioners has a number of appointments for all kinds of boards around the county. The Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals are one of the appointments where each individual district commissioner can bring forward a name, and then the entire Board of Commissioners votes to approve that person on the Planning Commission or the BZA. And we'll use acronyms PC, BZA to mean those two things. The next point is, what is code enforcement? So you have your planning, which is your big long-term vision of where we're going as a community. You have your zoning, which is your land regulations to say how we're gonna actually do it. Well, code enforcement is the land use version of the enforcement. So they kind of, when something is getting built, they'll make sure the zoning regulations are being followed. After it's been built and the property has been given a CO, the structure has been given a CO by the chief building official, which is a certificate of occupancy, then they'll make sure it meets particular standards for the lot. So if you have a neighbor whose grass is growing up 2 feet high, Well, they would want to call code enforcement. If you have a neighbor who unfortunately is a hoarder and is compiling 15 types of land furniture that's strewn across the lawn, that's something we want to call code enforcement. So that's what code enforcement does. They'll enforce the zoning stipulations, and then they'll also make sure that people's property are meeting a minimum level of maintenance that meets basic community standards. So, how do I find out what zoning is on property? We're going to do questions at the end, sir, so that make sure we get all of the information out for everybody. How do you find out what zoning is on a property? So we're going to go through the little nuts and bolts about our online mapping so you can get this information in an easy way right from your home computer. So you go to, did I go to the particulars of it? I did not. Okay, you go to, this is kind of showing a map of the actual zoning. This is at the intersection of, I think I put Shallowford Road here and Sandy Plains. So everybody knows that area up in District 3. You'll see here most of your yellows are your low-density residential type zonings, R20, R15. You'll see this brown one here is an old zoning code that we don't really use much anymore, which is called planned residential development for like a small lot type development. You'll see your blues, which are your low-rise office or office institutional, and you'll see your reds, which is your commercial type, so your CRCs, GCs, and NRCs, neighborhood retail commercial, community retail commercial, and general commercial, so I'm not talking the acronyms to everybody. So that's kind of your nuts and bolts. You can go to the Cobb County website, www.cobbcounty.org, and on the lower right-hand side, you'll see a link for GIS mapping. You just click that link, and then it'll come up with all kinds of different options for you for different types of maps you could look at. You would then click the zoning one. And from there, you can either scan into the area you want to look at, or you can just go up to this address bar at the top, put the address in for the particular piece of property you're interested in, and it'll zoom into something just like this. And if you put an address in, it'll actually highlight the parcel that you selected and tell you exactly what your zoning is. So this is what your zoning looks like. For that same area, this is what your future land use would look like. So under the same area, I'm going to go back for a second. You see these things here? These will tell you what your zoning classifications are. And then if you want to find out what the future land use is, you just click on that button on the side that says future land use, and it'll allow you to change the map in order to show what the future land use is. And you would want to deselect the zoning layer, because if not, it'll get confusing, because you'll be looking at the zoning and the future land use all at the same time. That might be gobbledygook. So that's a way that you can deselect the zoning and then select the future land use. You'll get a nice map like this that kind of shows from the land use side, the future land use side, what's happening in this particular area. So what's happening in this area? It's pretty simple. You'll see your green. Green under your future land use are park, recreation, or conservation uses. You'll see your white ones. I keep on hitting the wrong button. You'll see your white areas, which is your low-density residential areas. You'll see your blue, which is your institutional areas, office or institutional areas. And you'll see your red, which is your community activity center areas. So again, we talked about how different zoning classifications are appropriate within different types of future land use. So you heard me mention before that there's R15 and R20 in this area, but they're both contained in that land in that low-density residential. Just to kind of give you an idea of how all of this fits together as a neat little package. So, so you're sitting at home and you get a letter from somebody and it says, we're asking the Board of Commissioners to rezone our land. What do you do? Well, we're going to tell you a little bit about why you want to get involved, how you can get involved, and kind of get a little bit better understanding of how it is that you can help influence the change in land and development in your particular area. So first of all, why do you want to get involved? Because it's your community. This is Cobb County for all of us. And if you want to have a voice in what's going to get built in your area, you'll want to have you'll want to have a say and you will want to get involved in zoning in your area, because zoning, again, is your land use rights. When your land use rights change, you have a possibility for something different to go there than what may be there right now. We're going to get into the how right now on how you get involved. So, we're going to figure out, I think we already did how to figure out future land use, but we'll go through it again. So you'll want to do your investigations. Your future land use, you go to your site map. You'll go to planning. You'll go to the flume descriptions. Before we were talking about, you know, what does LDR mean? What does community activity center mean? This is how you find out. So you go to your site map. You go to planning. You come down here to the flume descriptions. This will be available online, by the way, so you don't have to take a lot of notes. This is already posted online on the community development website. And then this will give you the descriptions of what these acronyms mean. So low-density residential, the purpose of the low-density residential category is to provide for areas that are suitable for low-density housing between 1 and 2.5 dwelling units per acre. This category presents a range of densities. That's the general description of what low-density residential means. So how is my area zoned? We talked about this already, but we're going to do it again in more detail so you can see what you're going to be looking at. You'll go to cobbcounty.org. You'll hit GIS mapping. You'll hit zoning information. From there, you'll get this nice full view of all of Cobb County and all of our wonderful 6 cities that we have in the county. You'll go up to that top and you'll put in an address. For our address, we're going to put in 2960 Shallerford Road. It'll show up right here on the left-hand side. You click it, and it'll take you right to the piece of property that was identified. And that you can see right there means CRC. Well, what does CRC mean? How do I find out what CRC means? You go to identify, you click the parcel that was identified, and it'll bring up this little thing here that says zoning district, CRC, and then it'll say website and clerk's minutes. You click on the website, and it'll take you to another page called Municode. This is a outsourced company that our clerk's office hires to maintain the county code for us. And when you hit that link to the county code, it'll take you directly here to the community retail commercial category, and you could read the 6, 7, 8, 10 pages of rules and regulations for what CRC means. In general, what it means, it's an area for moderately scaled commercial or retail uses. Sum it up 10 pages into a nice little soundbite. That's generally what it means, but it has all of the rules and regs. How tall can the building be? How far off the property lines does it have to be? Impervious surface allowances and a lot. All of these things are covered in the zoning regulations of the county code. So, how do I monitor and react to these zonings in my area? Besides getting a letter, which means someone's doing something within 1,000 feet of your property, let me start back. There's different ways you can find out about zonings. You can find out from the website. You can find out because someone puts a sign on their property. A sign on the property, it says, hey, something's going to happen here. I better find out what it is. A sign can be for lots of different things. And it depends on the color of the sign. And I'm going to ask John to go through the colors for us real quick. John, what does each sign mean for us, sir?
Excuse me. There are about a half a dozen different types of zoning signs. The ones you want to look out for, that are the most important ones, are the yellow signs. They're your zoning notices, which changed the zoning designation for property from like a residential to a commercial, or residential to a more dense residential. So you want to look out for the ones that say zoning notice. And the signs are big. They're 3 feet by 2 feet in size, and they're posted 30 days prior to the hearing, so keep an eye out for those. A companion sign to the zoning sign is what we call our pursuant to sign. It's got all this mouse type on it, all this legal language about what the board can and can't do with the property that's being zoned. So when you see a zoning notice, you can see a pursuant to notice. The third type of yellow sign you're going to see is our other business sign. These are properties where the board has already made a zoning decision, but they're going to consider amending either the zoning conditions or the site plan for the property that was previously zoned. So keep an eye out for those too.
We'll explain more about what other business means later on in the presentation.
Yeah, and you know, with the yellow signs, the other business or zoning notices, a person within 1,000 feet should get a letter 2 weeks prior to the hearing. So the letter should have the application, the site plan, and just a summary of where the hearing is, which they're always here in this room, the date and the time, which they always start at 9 o'clock on the hearing date. The second type of sign to look out for are our pink signs. They are variance notice signs. And as Dana said, those are not changing the use of a property, but they enable the applicant to amend something about the zoning code that they may not meet. Like a setback is a typical thing where they may reduce a setback by 5 or 10 feet. They may want to reduce a buffer or increase a building height or something like that. So look out for the pink ones. The two other ones we have blue signs, which are temporary land use permits. And those are permits on residential properties that allow uses that are not allowed. So someone may want to do a hairdresser in their home. So the blue signs tell you that in 30 days, the board's going to consider a temporary land use permit. And those are good for up to 24 months. So they're typically approved for 12 months or 24 months, but the board has the option to approve for any time length that they want. And the last type of sign we have is a gray sign. That's our special land use permit sign. Those are for uses that are allowed in every zoning category, but the board wants to take an extra look at it. And these are things that people really don't like. They're cell towers, they're concrete plants, they're asphalt plants,
Waste transfer stations.
waste transfer stations. They're just things
Fun stuff.
that cause a lot of extra special problems. So, and all those are 30-day postings also, and also require a letter within 1,000 feet. And the letters come from the tax records. So, you know, from time to time we do get complaints that someone didn't get a letter, and what we normally find is that the tax records may be wrong. It's kind of odd because up on the GIS map, your correct address is going to show, but the data source they use for the addresses is different. It may have your old address or someone's old address on it. So when you see those signs, you know, the phone number's on here to call our office if you want to. You can also go to the website to look up the online zoning stuff. It's all posted online. Usually it's posted about 60 days prior to the hearing. So a lot of folks, they have the tendency to look for the zoning analysis information just on a monthly basis. And we do send out alerts if you're on our zoning notification system. And one came out today. We did put the final variance analysis online today, and also the preliminary or the final other business for the Board of Commissioners for next week. So if you sign up for that notification, you will get notified as soon as we put it online.
John, do you sign up for that from your website, or do you get that from the communications website?
You get that from communications.
So if you just go to cobbcounty.org and go to communications department, you'll be able to sign up for those zoning alerts. And as soon as new information's put up, you'll get a blast will go out about it. Commissioner?
Also, in my newsletter, my weekly newsletter, I list all the zoning that are upcoming, like next Tuesday, for District 3. And I know some of the other commissioners may do this too, but if you live in District 3 and you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get the breakdown of the different cases that are on the agenda for Tuesday for District 3. I can't do them all, but you can go to the website and get them all. So, and if you ever have any questions, you can always call my office too for District 3.
So there's lots of ways to get information about what's happening zoning-wise. We talked about the signs that go up. We talked about the letters that happen if you're within 1,000 feet of it. We have the alert blasts that go out if you sign up for the zoning notification. You can work with your district commissioners on their newsletters to get information. And finally, we have just the good old-fashioned website. You can go here, and if you go to the site map on the www.cobbcounty.org, you can go to Zoning Online Analysis. And if you hit that button, you will literally have years and years and years worth of zoning information about what's happened every single month. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit about how you can use this information to help you understand what's happening. So we're going to go through and we're going to look at a case that happened in 2015 in February. So the first thing that'll come out is John and his staff will put together what's called a preliminary analysis. A preliminary analysis is basic information that's the very earliest bit of information that we receive that has basically a one-page detailed sheet about what's happening and a site plan that shows what's occurring and a purpose and intent from the applicant, and we'll show one in a second. And so when you hit the preliminary analysis, this will be the front page of it. It'll tell you when the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners hearings will be, what date this was distributed on. So if you see, we'll distribute this in December, in the middle of December, and that would be for the February hearings that come forward in that particular time frame. So you get a good amount of time to prepare for things if you're able to get this information early through the different means that we have. So the first thing you'll notice, we're going to look at Z1 from 2015. This was out off of
Mars Hill Road.
Mars Hill Road, which is over in District 1 in Cobb County. So this will be the site plan that the applicant submitted to the county. It looks like a residential development, smaller lot off of a two-lane collector road. The second thing that we'll provide for you is some zoning information that our staff gleans from the application that was submitted. So it'll provide information like what zoning numbers it's going to be, who is the applicant, who's representing the applicant, where is the property located, when are the hearing dates, what is the zoning on the property right now, what is the applicant asking for, what's the future land use on this particular property. All this basic general type of information so that you can get a real good basis of this is what the applicant's asking the board to consider. Then there'll also be what we call a summary and intent of the zoning. This is something that the applicant prepares, and this kind of lets them provide a little bit more information about what's happening with this particular case and what their ask is. So for this particular one, again, we're talking about Z1 from 2015. They're proposing 2,500 to 3,500 square foot lots, traditional single-family homes with brick and stone and board siding. They're estimating a price range, and they're not asking for any particular variances for this particular case. So again, it's just some basic information that can help the community understand what the request is. So you're a community member. You figure out that someone's asking for a zoning within a quarter mile of your home, and you want to get involved somehow. How is it that you can then take this information and start negotiating with the developer on some things that you may want to see happen? And how you do that is through what's called stipulations. So your zoning has your general criteria of everything on there, but maybe you want to see certain things happen. Maybe you don't want to see 35-foot tall homes. You want it to be a little bit lower. That's something you can negotiate with the developer. Maybe you want to make sure there's a certain minimum lot size in the lot. That's something that you can work with the developer on stipulation. So there's lots of things you can stipulate, and we're going to go through a lot of the common things that we hear from our neighborhood organizations. So again, this is about you preparing your statements and your negotiations with the developer. So one of the common things that we get is architecture. What are the buildings going to look like? How tall? How many stories? What are the colors they're going to use? How many square feet? Where are the mechanical units going to be located? Particularly if you live on the edge of a commercial node, that's really important. Where is the air conditioning going to be? Why is that important? It can be loud. So you want to make sure it's not going to be right next to the property line where that sound is going to impact you. What type of building materials are they going to use in the development? These are a lot of the questions that we hear from the community groups, and here are some sample stipulations that we've pulled out of different cases that we've seen to kind of address some of these type of issues. So a sample stipulation would be general residential appearance of the building to be preserved. When we use this, there's a lot of times if you'll go down some of your major roads and you'll see like an old single-family home that's been converted into a office use or a dentist or something like that, this will be a great stipulation for it because you want the look and feel to stay residential, but maybe it's okay to have a small dentist office there. I'm not saying in all cases it is, but in some cases that is appropriate. This would be a good stipulation you could use to help make sure the appearance of that structure maintains the residential character of the area. The architectural style and composition of the building shall remain the same as the building which presently exists there too. So maybe you have Georgian-style architecture on an old home that's on the lot, and you want to help preserve that and make sure that whatever else they build there is going to be compatible with it. That's another type of good stipulation you could use in order to make sure there's architectural integrity between the buildings that are happening there. John, do you have any other good examples you might want to recommend for people that you see commonly?
Well, when considering your conditions, you want to be very specific because the devil's in the details with this architectural stuff. You know, by way of example, out on Dallas Highway, there's a Meineke Mufflers shop near the Home Depot. It's got 3 sides stucco, and the back side is corrugated metal. And you know, how that got there was when they showed their architecture, just showed the front and the sides, and that's what it got stipulated to. The rear didn't matter, but that building is turned sideways, so you see the metal side when you're driving down the road. So you want to be very specific on all 4 sides, the colors, the lighting, the signage, what the roof's made out of. You know, some people prefer shingle, somewhat standing seam metal roofs. You want to know what the color roof's going to be. You know, there's some red ones, there's some green ones. So with this stuff, you want to be very specific on how it's going to look because it's going to be there for a long time.
General lifespan of the building is at least 50 years. Kind of give you a sense of it. So another thing, and you heard John mention this, landscaping is another detail that comes up quite a bit. You know, what are they going to do to, you know, replant to make sure it has a quality look and you're maintaining vegetation? So some of the things you want to look at is there landscaping along the front, sides, and rear of the lot. What type of landscaping is it? Is it evergreen or is it a deciduous type tree? Obviously that makes a difference because if you're trying to use a tree as a buffer, you want to make sure it's green all year long so that in the middle of the winter time you're not having a straight shot view into that back of that dumpster. It's a good example of why you want to be careful of these kind of details. Is the material going to be tall or short? Is it a short style tree? Does it only grow to be about a 6-foot tall bush? Or is it going to be an oak tree that can be 40, 50 feet tall? How long does it live? Different trees and different types of plant materials have a different lifespan. Obviously, an oak tree can last for hundreds of years. A crepe myrtle doesn't last nearly as long as an oak tree will. So those are things to consider and think about. And finally, and this is, I guess, we've heard from the chairman today that we're in another drought, so this next one's appropriate. Does this type of material need a lot of watering and attention? Because obviously if we put a bunch of landscaping in and they don't take care of it, it has potential to die. So you want to make sure you want to think about water usage for the plants to make sure that that's covered under your particular stipulations. And you'll be able to look back at these stipulations, see some examples. And John, is there anything you want to add to the landscaping side?
There's been a lot lately about buffers coming through back for amending the conditions. You know, my druthers is if you have a landscape buffer is to keep it as small as possible, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet maybe. When you get into bigger buffers, that causes problems for a lot of folks down the line. It may sound good at the hearing when you're up here agreeing to it, but down the road, 15, 20 years down the road, a person is going to want to use their property, so a 50-foot buffer, it may work great today, but in 10 years it's not going to work great for the person who owns that property that they're paying taxes on, where they can't use the 50 feet. So you want to be very specific with buffers. My preference is to keep them as small as possible and to include a fence, because you know the purpose of a buffer is to provide visual and sound screening. And a fence works good for the immediate screening and sound buffering, but over time you want a nice thick buffer growing in there. And there's a variety of stuff, as Dana alluded to, that stays green all year round and lives for a very long time. So when you're agreeing to buffers, you know, my preference is to keep them small, unless they're in a common area. If they're commonly owned in open space, then that's fine. But when you have buffers on individual lots, then that causes problems down the road. And you know, it's not uncommon for us to get calls weekly about someone who's cutting a tree down in a buffer. You know, once it's cut down, there's not much you can do but make them replant something that may take 15 years to get back up to where it was.
And I'll add one caveat to John's comments too. The smaller buffers are usually good when you're doing residential against residential, because you are dealing with someone who's going to own that lot, and they're going to want to use their backyard for something. Where if you're maybe buffering between an industrial use and a residential use, you want a pretty big buffer, because you want to make sure that any of the sound or emittances that might come from the facility are handled, and there's enough space and screen to handle that.
Yeah, and what Dana just said, when you're talking about buffers between residential and commercial industrial users, it's a lot easier to maintain a buffer for a commercial or industrial user, because they don't want to use that property. You know, they want to build what they want to build, and it's going to be like that for a long time. But when you're talking about residential uses, that's where we're getting the problems with people wanting to use their property and trim the buffer, take stuff out, and things like that.
So another common thing, and John, we're going to take questions at the end, so please remember your questions. John mentioned lighting. Lighting is a big concern. The last thing that you want to have when you're negotiating a zoning is you want someone to put a parking lot light, and it's going to shine a spotlight right through your front window where it's going to hit you in the eye while you're trying to sleep. Nobody wants that. So some of the things you want to think about with lighting. Does the lighting stay on all day long, or does it shut off at a certain time? Where's the lighting located in the lot? What direction is it pointed in? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it going out? Is it going to be on a tall pole? Are you going to put it on a building? Or are you going to put it on the ground pointing up towards the building? Do you have shields on the lighting to make sure that lighting does not go off the property and instead focuses down onto the ground below it? And finally, what's the light design for the actual pole? Is it going to be decorative? Is it going to be your standard, stainless steel pole or metal pole? These are some of the things that you'll want to think about on the lighting side. On signage is always going to be a concern that people are going to want to come up. So when you're thinking about signage, again, we're really talking about your non-residential uses, particularly on signing. What kind of colors are going to be? Where is the location? What kind of size is it going to be? Are they going to use LED lights? Is it going to be blinking all the time? What kind of materials is the base going to be constructed out of? It's going to be a stone. It's going to be a brick. Is it going to be what? Those are some of the things you want to think about with signs. Dumpster locations, if it's going to have a dumpster on the lot, so if it's a restaurant or something like that. Is the dumpster going to be enclosed? Is the enclosure going to match the architectural style of the building? Is the dumpster going to be close to the property lines or to the residential properties? What hours are the pickup going to be allowed for that particular dumpster? And then this is a very important one. Are there going to be rubber lids to help reduce noise? But the last thing you want at 7 o'clock in the morning, which you can pick up trash at 7 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to have a metal top go smack down when the machine puts it back down on the ground. Very loud. And if you're someone who sleeps a little bit later, would cause quite a disturbance for you. And finally, we're going to talk about uses. When you get into the zoning code, you'll have, we'll use community retail commercial, CRC again. There's probably a good, John, 30 different uses that are allowed within the CRC zoning district. Yes. And it can be everything from general retail, where you're just trying to sell something to somebody. It could be a restaurant. It could be
It could be anything as nice as a professional office that's nice and quiet, to something that may be like an auto body shop, where you may hear noise, you may smell things, and things like that. But CRC allows for almost the most intense commercial uses in the county. So just be aware, when you're restricting uses, you want to be very specific on that also. And it seems like we've gotten into the practice of not allowing automotive uses on some properties and limiting outdoor storage and outdoor displays of merchandise, because those are the things that cause the most problems.
So the uses are important, because your uses will determine the intensity of what ends up being there within that building over time. I think John just mentioned the outdoor display of merchandise. That's something you want to be cognizant of, because you don't, depending on what they're storing, it could be something that could hold water. If it holds water, well, you might have mosquitoes in it. Lots of consequences to things that could happen that you want to be cognizant of. And that kind of brings up, all of these together bring up some come together to have long-term thoughts about what you're doing on the land. We want to make sure that the property is going to be better off in the long term through the approval of this particular zoning compared to what was before, and it's going to ensure the long-term viability of the overall neighborhood. That's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do through this entire zoning process. As John very appropriately mentioned, the devil is in the details on all this zoning stuff, because after the Board of Commissioners approves something and it kind of shifts to staff to administer it, we're going to go by the letter of the law. So if it's something that's covered in the zoning regulations, it'll be regulated per the zoning regulations. If there's a stipulation that says X, Y, and Z is supposed to be done, we're going to make sure X, Y, and Z is supposed to be done. If the community thought that Q was supposed to be in there, but it would never got into the letter, we're going to go by what X, Y, and Z says in the stipulations itself. That's why they're so important to make sure that you're paying attention to the specifics of what's in the details of the stipulations. So that's what you're going to do. So tips on how you negotiate. So you get this zoning notice. You figure out something's going to happen with a quarter mile. You now know a lot of the things you want to look at and think about when you're negotiating with the letter. Well, how do you go through that negotiation? As you saw previously, we list the applicant and their representative on it. A lot of times you can just call up their representative and talk to them about it. I would recommend, though, that the community get together and think about what you want to do. There are a number of organized community groups around Cobb County. I think the Tyrrell Mill Community Association is one, East Cobb Civic Association, Mableton Improvement Coalition, People Looking After Neighborhoods, Canton Road Neighbors. There's a lot of different community groups who kind of organize and help try to educate people about zonings that's happening in their area. And they come together and they help neighborhoods negotiate with developers. You might not have an area that has a neighborhood association, so you can get together with your neighbors and think about what it is that you want. Are there particular aspects of it that you want to negotiate with the neighbors to make sure it fits into your community, into your neighborhood? You can just pick up the phone, call the representative, and schedule a meeting to sit down and talk with them. I would recommend that the community get together, again, think about what they want. You could also ask the representative to come out and do host a information meeting with the community so that you can hear directly from the representative exactly what you want, and that allows the opportunity for dialogue between the community and the requester of what they're trying to do. That dialogue is where we're going to find the sweet spot of what might meet everyone's needs, which is what we're always trying to get to, is trying to meet everybody's needs. A lot of times your commissioner can help guide you too. If you have a question about, you don't know if there's a community group in your area, you can call your commissioner and they can help you. You can call community development, and if we know of one, we'll help you as well. We're always trying to help connect people to different avenues of places where they can get information and get other people that can help you with your cause and what you're trying to do. So, helpful tip, get organized, get specific, and know what you want to get out of it. I think those are the best tips I can give you. John, do you have any other good tips wisdom you want to bestow?
The entire zoning process is pretty complicated. It's pretty lengthy. What I would encourage you to do when you see the signs go up is to call our office and get the name, phone number of the person who wants to zone the property and start working with them as early as possible. Most of the time when you're working out all these conditions relating to architecture, buffers, signs, lighting, it's a compromise. So they're not going to get what they want all the time, and you're not going to get what you want all the time. But what you want to walk away with is something that's going to protect you in the long run. So you want to get to them as early as possible and start negotiating conditions.
So you've organized as a community. You know what you want to get out of it. You've started negotiations. You've talked to the representative. You've come to some general agreement. Well, what is it going to look like? How is it that you're going to see what's actually in the stipulations? This is some examples of a zoning stipulation letter from one of our local representatives, attorneys, who represents a lot of zoning clients in Cobb County. So, when you look through this, this is very, very specific language. I'll just read a couple so you can get a sense of how specific this is. The proposed residence shall have a minimum of 3,000 square feet upward to 5,000 square feet or greater. The residence within the proposed community shall have four-sided architecture, having the front and all sides of the proposed residence composed of brick, stone, stacked stone, hardy plank, cedar shake, and similar type materials. The setbacks for the proposed residential community shall be as follows. Front setback shall be 25 feet, rear setback shall be 30 feet, side setbacks shall be 20 feet for the exterior lots and 20 feet for the interior lots. So an exterior lot is, if you're at an intersection and you have two roads there, your exterior lot's going to be those that are on the outside towards the road, where an interior lot, your only side's going to be your neighbors. Interior lot versus exterior lot. So you can see these are going to be very, very detailed stipulations. Here's another great one. We talked about signage before. The entrance sign for the proposed community shall be a ground-based monument-style sign that consists of brick, stone, and a combination thereof with accents. And it kind of goes on with describing what those accents are. That's why John and I are both recommend saying that the devil is in the details, because when we're looking to see if they're in compliance, we're going to be looking directly at this letter that got negotiated between the community and the applicant, and we're going to make sure that gets built to the best of our ability. So whatever's in that letter is what we're going to be making sure gets built on the ground. So if it says that, if it doesn't mention that utilities will be underground and you expected it and you didn't think that you were going to have poles with power lines going through, if it didn't say it in the letter, it's a possibility they might put the poles up. If you want to make sure it doesn't have poles and lines going forward, make sure they put them underground. If you thought that the entrance sign was only going to be 50 square feet, and they built one that's 150 square feet, we're going to look at the zoning conditions, see specifically what it says, and make sure it was built to those particular standards. So that's why this is so important, because these stipulations are really going to provide the specifics and details of what is going to get built. So, John, would you please go through a little bit about your zoning book and kind of what you see within your zoning book, sir?
Yes, sir. What happens is once a zoning case is submitted to Cobb County, we distribute it to all the county departments. So we're going to give it to the fire department, the Department of Transportation, Water and Sewer, Stormwater Management, the school board, the arborist, the Cemetery Preservation Commission, the Planning Department, the Historic Preservation Commission, and they all make comments and they all give them back to zoning, and we put it in the zoning book. And that culminates in a staff recommendation. By rule of thumb, what I prefer to do is to have the staff recommendation done before the signs go up. So we got about 2 weeks to get the staff rec to be done. And I like to do it that way because I don't want to do the recommendation in a vacuum. I don't want to have a whole bunch of pros and cons for the recommendation. I just want to take a pure look at it with the staff comments and make a recommendation on it. So sometimes you may see a staff recommendation that you may not agree with. You may say we're crazy or we don't know what we're doing. But we look at all areas of the county and we serve all areas of the county. So the staff rec is going to be tailored really for all parts of the county, because we don't tailor it for Vinings or Mapleton or Smyrna or West Cobb or East Cobb. It's the same rec every time. After the staff recommendation is done, the book is printed and it's put online. All the cases are listed in numerical order, and they also have the district number and the road name in the title now, so you can find it much more easier. About 2 weeks after the book is printed, we have our first hearing before the Planning Commission. That's where we present the Planning Commission with our recommendation. They look at the staff recommendations. A public hearing is held, and in that public hearing, both sides have 10 minutes to state their case of concern. So the applicant has 10 minutes to present their case, and then the opposition has 10 minutes to state their concerns. It's important to note that each side only gets 10 minutes. So if there's 10 people in the opposition, you need to coordinate with each other what you're going to talk about, because each side only gets 10 minutes. You don't want to state the same thing over and over again.
Let me interject something there, John. So let's talk about the specifics of the hearing itself. So the chairman, either the chairman of the Planning Commission or the chairman of the Board of Commissioners, will open the case, at which point in time John will give a general overview of what the case is, so everyone will know specifically what case is being considered. From that point on, the chairman will open up the public, will allow the applicant to give their 10 minutes. So they'll give their why this should get approved. After that, the chairman will call for opposition to come up, and opposition will have, again, 10 minutes collectively to talk about why they think it should be approved or how it could be improved or whatever your comments or thoughts are on that. After that second 10 minutes is done, the public hearing portion of the hearing is over, at which point in time the members of the Planning Commission or the members of the Board of Commissioners are able to then discuss amongst themselves. They may go to John or any other staff person to ask questions. They may want to follow up with someone in the community who'd said something interesting that they were a little more curious about and ask them to come back up and ask them a specific question. But during that particular portion of it, it is all about a question and answer period where the Planning Commissioner or the Board of Commissioners will ask a question, and whomever they ask a question to, whether it be staff or to the community, a community person who gave testimony, would then be expected to give an answer back. After the question and answer is done, the board again talks amongst themselves, and then a recommendation is formed. If it's a planning commission, they'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve Z1 of 2015 and then list a bunch of stipulations or mention the stipulation letter or any other stipulations that may be done. Or it could be we make a motion to deny Z1, and that's all you have to say if you're just going to deny it. They'll wait to see if somebody seconds it. So let's say Planning Commissioner Porter made the recommendation for this particular zoning case of Z1 of 2015. Let's say Commissioner Trombetti seconds it. That means it's a live motion. That means you were going to vote now. So they'll call the question. It gets approved 5-0, or it gets approved 3-2, it gets denied 4-1, whatever the contents of it. So the Planning Commission makes a recommendation. Board of Commissioners do the same exact thing. The only difference is when the Board of Commissioners makes a decision, it's final, with the Planning Commissioner's recommendation. So that final decision gets made. So if someone doesn't like the decision, at that point in time, they only have one other option. Appeal through the courts, that's correct. Go ahead, John. Sorry, sir.
Okay, moving on. What you see here, this is a standard stormwater management comment page. This is what we take a look at regarding stormwater. In here, stormwater lists things like what creek it flows into, how much floodplain is on the property, if there's wetlands on the property, if there's any stream buffer issues, and if there's any downstream conditions. And this is probably the most important part. You want to take a close look at this because it's going to govern what gets put on the property and how the stormwater is handled. So they may need a bigger pond, they may need a deeper pond, they may need to reduce the water at a slower rate. So you want to take special notice to this part right here where it talks about the stormwater conditions. This right here is a Cobb DOT recommendation page. Up here it's got the road, Marcel Road, how many trips per day, 17,300 I believe, arterial road, 45 miles per hour, and the right-of-way requirement is 100 feet. They got comments about it, and then down here is their recommendation. So if the board approves this zoning case, then they're going to institute these items right here to mitigate the negative effects of what this development's going to do to the roadway system. And it includes curb, gutter, sidewalk, a deceleration lane, and a left turn lane, and verifying site distances available, just so cars can enter and leave the site safely.
But the DOT will make their comments based upon the engineering conditions of the site. So if a left turn lane is not necessary for that, from their engineering models, is not necessary as part of that development, they're not going to make that recommendation. Where maybe they actually need to extend a turn lane down another 200 feet because of the anticipated load on that particular road for that development, that would be a recommendation that would come forward. So that the point of this is that if we're going to impact infrastructure through for the development, the developer is then responsible for paying for those system upgrades to our stormwater or transportation system.
These right here are the planning comments for the same case. In here, the planning department lets us know what the comprehensive plan says about it, what the density the Board of Commissioners wants to see on the property. It's up to 2 units per acre for this particular case. They talk about corridor studies if they apply. This one does not. And in here, they just go through all the open space requirements to make sure it meets or does not meet the plan. And this one did meet the plan, and it ultimately got approved. In the finished book, as I mentioned before, there's staff comments from all these departments. Zoning, school, fire, planning, water, sewer, stormwater management, transportation, staff recommendation, and also boards like the Historic Preservation Board and the Cemetery Preservation Commission. Here is the finished staff recommendation. They all follow the same format of A, B, C, D, and F. These things are required for staff to look at per the county code, and they just measure if the proposal is going to be an adverse thing for the community to accept. And at the very bottom are, in the staff recommendation, are the things that staff's going to recommend the board approve if the board follows the staff recommendation. And it's important to note that the staff recommendation is just a recommendation. The Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners is not subject to following that recommendation if they don't want to. And like I said, this recommendation was done before the signs went up, so there may be information that we don't know about that comes up during the public hearings during the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners. And that does happen a lot of the times where we hear about drainage problems or traffic problems or problems with schools or things that may be in the buffer or certain types of trees or things like that. So, this, in addition to what the Planning Commission recommendation is what the Board of Commissioners takes into account when they make their decision. And they do make the final decision. We talked about this. This is the other business process right here.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead. These are the yellow signs you're going to see that say other business, and these are the signs that the board uses when they're amending site plans or stipulations. It doesn't happen very often, but from time to time, things do change about a property and things have to be amended, such as conditions of the site plan.
And the reasons why you'll see this are varied. It may be like they're doing the development and they realize that there is rock in a particular area that they didn't realize when they were doing their geotechnical studies. They want to move the building a little bit over this way. Or it's a retail development and it said no of certain use, but most of what who's trying to get there is a use that was previously said can't go there. They'll go to the board and say, would this use be allowable? These are some of the things that you'll see commonly between uses and site plan changes or stipulation changes that would come up in the course of an other business. And that's treated just like a zoning as far as public comment, public hearing, signs, notifications are concerned.
This is the agenda from this particular hearing for other business, and this is why I say the devil's in the detail. Item number 2 here is something that staff put on the agenda because the zoning condition regarding the detention pond was kind of in a gray area, and we couldn't figure out what the board's intent was. And this boils down to a conflict between the developer and the people who bought houses in there. And the board ultimately did decide on who owns the pond and what they're going to do with it.
Could you read what it says? It's really tiny.
It says to consider a stipulation, clarification, and amendment regarding a detention facility for rezoning application Z107 of 2006 for property located on the south side of Stylesboro Road at Johnston Trail and Land Lot 216 in the 20th District. So this condition, the staff couldn't figure out what the board's intent was. So we had to bring it back and find out what the intent was.
So you'll get staff sometimes bringing forward other business if we are unclear about something. Sometimes it's the applicant who is asking the board to reconsider a stipulation they placed on it.
This is an application for other business. This is just a standard form we use. The rezoning application is very similar to this. It just has basic information on like the applicant, their address, their phone number, their email, where the property is located, and what they want to change about the conditions. And here's the site plan that accompanied that application. And this one, they want to change this little area right here from the approved plan to this proposed plan. Here's the original minutes that stipulate that original site plan as the controlling document. And this is what the developer wants to change, is this first thing right here.
So that's the zoning. Variances are very, very similar. The only difference is you go to a different tab. When you started doing your zonings, you were looking at your left-hand column. It says Planning Commission and Board of Commissioner cases, 2006 to who knows when. On your right-hand tab, you have your Board of Zoning Appeal and variance cases. So we're going to look at one from 2016, August. Just like in the zoning, you'll have a preliminary that comes out that gives you a heads up about what is going to be coming forward. And then as we get documentation as far as the final variance analysis, it'll get uploaded by staff for the community to be able to react to. So this is what a variance site plan would look like. This is V88 from 2016. So it kind of shows the site plan and it shows the variance area that where they're making the request for. This, like John showed, this is showing the variance application again. It shows the case number, the hearing date, who is requesting the variance, some particulars on the property, and then down here, specifically what type of variance request they're making. In this case, turn down slab on grade is what they put down. So the reasoning for it is due to the steep contours of the front yard, the only viable location for the addition is in the rear yard. So it looks like they're trying to add on their house. They're not able to do it, so they kind of went into the setback a little bit because of the grade, so they had to ask for a variance on that particular site. Staff, just like in the zoning, will put together kind of a general bit of information about the particular case, same information about the applicant, representative, location, what the zoning is, and then finally what the specific variance cases. So we'll get in the application in property owner speak of what they're asking for. We will take that and we'll translate it into Planarese, is something that is very specific about their case. So before you saw the applicant say, due to the steep contours, the front yard is the only viable place to do the expansion. That really doesn't tell you what the specific variance is. So staff will take that information, we'll analyze it, and we'll say, oh, they want to waive the rear setback from the required 35 feet to 15 feet. So that's where staff comes in and kind of translates that in a way to make it easy for the Board of Zoning Appeals to know what they're voting on. So just like the Planning Commission hearing and just like the Board of Commissioners hearing, the Board of Zoning Appeals works the same exact way in their hearing procedures. The chairman will open up the case. John will read in for the record the specifics of that particular case. They'll have the applicant get up for 10 minutes to state why that variance should be granted. If there is opposition to that particular variance, they'll get up and speak on why that variance should not be granted. They'll be able to ask questions, talk amongst themselves as the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then finally make a decision. Again, but the one caveat, as I mentioned before, the Board of Zoning Appeals is quasi-judicial. That means if the applicant did not like the results of the hearing, their only appeal would then be to the Superior Court of Cobb County. And vice versa, that's correct. If the community didn't like it, they could make the same appeal to the courts. So, let's say that Z1 that we talked about before got approved. And how do I report on a suspected code enforcement violation or on a complaint on a neighbor that might not be keeping their property upright? So, if you go to www.cobbcounty.org, you can go to the Community Development webpage. This is the main page. You'll see in the corner a tab here for complaints and violations. You click right there on that tab, and it'll take you to this page. You can have a building complaint, you can have a code enforcement complaint, or you can have an erosion complaint. If you're not sure which one it is, you can just click one of them, and we'll make sure it gets to the right people. But we'll talk about code enforcement complaints right now. So you click on that code enforcement complaint, and it will take you to a page where you can actually input the complaints. This talks about the Code Enforcement Division a little bit. On the very top, it says submit a online complaint. You click that tab, and it'll take you to our software called Municode. I'm sorry, not Municode, Acela. Acela is our operating system for permitting. And with this operating system, you're able to do online anonymous complaints currently. So you're going to make a code enforcement complaint. You click on the code enforcement. Sorry, go back here. You could put in, I'll cover that again. You're going to submit a code enforcement complaint. You'll see a general disclaimer about use of this particular thing. It's just a general disclaimer and understanding that this information is accurate and timely, and it's subject to Freedom of Information Act requests if someone were to make a request for the documentation submitted. You click on the button that says, I accept this, and you hit continue. So from there, there are two ways to do this. If you know exactly what property is, you can type in the address, 1941 West Cobb Place Boulevard, if you know the specific address. If you don't know the address, but you know what the parcel identification number is, you know that long list of things you see in your tax bill, you can put that in there. It's unlikely you're going to know exactly that one, but it's still there or as an option. Or if you don't know either one of those, but you think you know the property owner's name, you can put the property owner's name information on there. All of this links to different other sources of information that Cobb County has access to through tax records or through our zoning information in order to get you the specifics of the parcel to help locate that. So once you hit the continue button there, once you've discovered the parcel you're looking for, it'll take you to the actual complaint. So do you want to continue or do you want to add a new complaint? I'm assuming you want to add a new complaint. So you'll hit the add complaint button. From here, if it's a business, you can put the name of the business in there, or you can just go ahead and put in the detailed description of what the inquiry is. My neighbor has trash all over the place, or the apartment complex next door is not emptying their trash. That's a common one we get a lot of times. We don't think that the zoning conditions is being met on a particular property. All of these are common code complaints that we'll receive. If you've taken pictures of a particular complaint, so you can show a picture of the dumpster with the trash bags flowing out of it all over the ground, you can add a picture there as well to help our code enforcement officers in their job. And then you hit the continue button. It'll give you some general information to make sure that everything is accurate. If everything's accurate, you hit continue. And from there, it can say that your inquiry is accepted. There is a point where earlier, you can put the information in this login and password information. You can put your own login and password in here. Some caveats on that. There's some positives and negatives to it. The positive to it, if you create your own password, if an action happens on it, you will receive an email that says, an officer has gone out on this date. Here's a copy of the report. A citation has been issued. It's been remedied, it's not been remedied, it's going to go to court. Those are all the type of emails you'll get if you sign up. If you don't want your neighbor knowing that you put in a code enforcement complaint against them, I would recommend not putting your name down because, again, that's back to Freedom of Information Act requests. If your neighbor gets really mad and they say, Dana, I want to find out who put this complaint against me, we're going to look at our records. And because of the Freedom of Information Act request, if a person's name is on there, I am required by law to provide that to the person who's requesting it. So just something to think about. Not saying it's good or bad. So there's positives and negatives to both. It depends on how much you like your neighbor or not, I guess, sometimes. So, but another important thing is it'll give you a case number. So you'll want to jot that down or print that or keep copy of that, because if you did put it in anonymously, you'll be able to use that case number to go back periodically to see the status of that particular case. So if you want to check a status, you'll be able to use that code. Generally speaking, with code enforcement, you have to understand when you put this in, a code enforcement officer will have about 10 days to go out and review that. We actually like to do it within 7 days, but by our code, we have 10 days to do it. After that point in time, we work with the property owner to get it resolved. So our job is not to get them in front of a judge in order to have a fine done. Our job is to get it cleaned up. Whatever the complaint is, we want to get it fixed because that's the most important thing. So we'll work with the property owner. If the property owner doesn't want to work with us, then we'll cite them to court because they're just kind of, Cobb County, go away. If they have that kind of attitude, we'll have Judge Holmes or somebody else in the magistrate court try to help with the situation. But generally speaking, our goal is to get that taken care of. So we'll go out, we'll review it, we'll document it. They have a certain number of days to fix it. Different types of violations have a different number of days. If they don't fix it within a day, or if they don't communicate with us about they're going on vacation for 2 weeks and can't fix it until they get back, we can work with people in order to help make that happen. Commissioner.
Thank you, Dana. I just wanted to point out one other thing, too. We do have code enforcement during the construction process. Once something is zoned and has a lot of stipulations and conditions on the permit, if you see, a lot of times we'll do construction hours and limit them and restrict them, especially during weekends when people are, off from work or trying to sleep or whatever, late at night. If you see something going on that is not supposed to be going on during their restricted hours of operation during construction, you can report that to our building permit inspections office, and a code enforcement officer through that division will go out and make sure that they're in compliance during the construction phase before it's an existing home or neighbor, with tall grass or stuff in the yard. So be cognizant of that too, because, once something is zoned and it has all these stipulations, if they're not enforced and carried through, what good are they? So we want you to be our eyes and ears out there and let us know if someone isn't in compliance with their construction permit and their stipulations. Thank you. And also, there's some other neighborhood groups. They are really good. Doug Davis is here from ECCA, and they assign case managers to the different zoning cases in their area of jurisdiction, and they're really good about following up when they see things going on that aren't supposed to go on according to the stipulations. And if they're in the minutes, and if there's stipulations and they're in the minutes, then they're enforced. Also, Aaron and Tullen from the Bells Ferry Civic Association are here. They're a recently reactivated group in my district, and I'm happy to have them working hard in District 3. And Vicki Plunkett is here from the Cobb Civic Coalition. So thank you all for being here. And did I miss any other neighborhood groups? Oh, Terrell Mill. Yeah, I think Dana recognized y'all. One other thing I'd like to recognize, Sherry George, who is a master gardener and Georgia Native Plant Society. When I first took office, she contacted me and told me about her Georgia Native plant rescues that she does on different properties. And so my very first zoning case, I'll never forget, Z5 of 2011, Post Oak Tritt and
Holly Springs.
Post Oak Tritt and Holly Springs, correct. We did a Georgia Native plant rescue, and I got to go with them on the plant rescue. And there are some beautiful plants native to Georgia that they go through the property before it's graded and cleared and rescue the plants that are native to Georgia. And they go back into our parks and recreation areas. So that's a great practice that Sherry George initiated with us on the Board of Commissioners. Now we all do it, and it's actually, if you go back to the slide of the stip letter from Moore Ingram, I think it's number 23, and all the developers are very eager and want to do it. We've never had anyone turn us down, but it's a great way to preserve our Georgia native plants and be kind of environmentally friendly. And it's a great project to participate in if you've never done one, because they're beautiful plants out there. So I just wanted to point that out. Now we all do them in all of our districts. So thank you, Sherry.
Thanks, Commissioner. And that was actually the end of that was the end of the presentation. So we showed you how to find out what your zoning and future land use on the property is. How do you find out about zonings and variances happening in your area? How do you make a code enforcement complaint? All of these kind of combine together to give you the basics of how you can get involved in your community and how you can get involved in zonings and land use issues that happen in your community. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that people may have. We'll just ask that people come up to the mic and speak it into the mic, and we will, one of us will respond if we can. Make sure it's on.
Yeah. Hey, Dana, my name's David Rumrell, and I've gotten involved in these in the last few years. Had a little more time on my hands and things going on with the economy picking up. But I'm interested in, could you go, for my benefit and for everybody else's, an actual timeline of all the things that happen? When an applicant, how long before a hearing does an applicant have to get his application in? John mentioned that the zoning recommendations, they try to get them out before the signs go up. And the sign is, I guess, 30 days before the Board of Commissioners meeting, not necessarily the Planning Commission. Can you go through all of those timeframes? Because I find for the general public, they think they know about it at the last second and don't have any time to respond.
Sure. John?
Okay, what normally happens is the last filing day for zoning applications is always it's always the first Thursday of the month. It's been like that forever in Cobb County. So for instance, this first Thursday we just had in September, date here, September 8th, the applications were turned in. Actually, it was the first Thursday was September 1st. So the applications were turned in September 1st for the November hearing dates, November dates.
First Thursday a month,
So,
2 months ahead of time.
yeah, about 2 months ahead of time.
And that's the kind of phrase I'm getting, not just first Thursday. The first Thursday of the month, 2 months before the hearing.
That's right.
Okay.
And then about a week after the application submitted, the zoning preliminary should be online. So that's a week after it's submitted.
So basically, the second week of each month, you can go onto the zoning online information, and you can get information about what's going to be coming up for that November set of hearings.
But it still hasn't been posted yet, right?
That's right.
No,
So it was submitted September 1st. So the signs are going to go up October the 4th.
So you're telling me the preliminary zoning information.
David, come back to the mic.
Up there now?
David, come back.
So I'm just trying to get time frame. You're telling me, using that as an example, if they were due September 1st, and it's now the 13th, the preliminary zoning analysis is going to be up
It should be-
now
it should
for
be online
November?
right now, yes,
Okay. Up on, you can go in the.
on the web.
Okay.
So,
And if you have our email blast, you'll get an email blast letting you know that it's out there.
All right, well, I get Joanne's, and so I follow that, but it's not always as timely as that.
My newsletter is different from what he's talking about. So you'll get it faster from him.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm trying to help myself and help my neighbors who have gotten involved in some of this.
And again, if you-
Understand that it's not, it always seems to them like it's an 11th hour thing, and I just found out about it. But actually, there's things happen 2 months ahead of time, sign goes up 1 month ahead of time,
that's
right?
correct.
Okay, so.
Then
there's-
letters go out two weeks before the first hearing.
But the letters only go out to people within 1,000 feet of the
That's
property.
correct.
So that,
And letters go to the property owner. So if you're leasing a house, the letter's not going to come to you. It's going to go to the property owner.
yeah. Okay. Continue with the timeframe.
So, but you mentioned about the email, but if you want to get on that email distribution list for when zoning and variance information is updated online, you can just go to www.cobbcounty.org, go to communications, you'll see the site map, go to communications, you can sign up right there. You just have to put your email in, and every single time John gets everything submitted up and ready to go, he'll hit submit to online, and he'll send out the email blast to everybody who wants to know to get access to that up-to-date zoning information.
Good,
Right, yeah,
good.
next.
Good.
I have a couple of questions, actually, and most of them are for clarification. There's quite a few zoning site plans that come in without an impervious surface calculation, and sometimes they go all the way through the process with never having that number for the public to see. So how does that happen, and why isn't it mandatory?
You know, we do check for impervious surface when we have variances. Typically, when you're bringing stuff in for zoning, it typically does not have the information unless, you know, it's going to be close. Then our stormwater folks would take a look at it. But, you know, regarding impervious, with rezonings, sometimes it's listed, sometimes it's not. It just depends on the case.
And even if it's not, there are impervious surface limits contained within the zoning districts. So it's going to have to meet that criteria unless they mention that it's going to not.
But it does not always. So I'm just curious how the public, how Joe neighbor would know, because a lot of site plans that come in look like there's an awful lot of impervious surface. So, and I also don't think the public knows, are they able to use buffer zones as part of that calculation? Are they able to use floodplain, wetlands, et cetera, when they're calculating? Because it does boil down to a significant increase in density when you're talking about non-buildable property within the development. So that calculation, to me, is a very important thing for the public who isn't necessarily tied in with the stormwater department or knows how to get it. It's difficult to get it calculated yourself, so.
Yeah. And one thing about the impervious surface is, as Dana said, there are requirements in the zoning code that you can't exceed impervious surface limits for your residential and commercial. If the person does not ask for it, then they do not get that no matter what. So it's got to be called out. It's got to be given as a variance by the Board of Commissioners. If it turns out that the impervious is going to be higher, then they either have to apply for a variance through our Board of Zoning Appeals or go back to the Board of Commissioners to amend their conditions.
I know we aren't talking about specific zoning cases, so I'm trying not to. It's kind of like mentioning a sponsor when you're not supposed to, right? But if the initial site plan had a impervious surface calculation of 1/4 of an acre on a 30-acre application, that's highly unlikely, number one. Number two, the revised site plan has none. So what do you do about that?
Our Stormwater Management Division does review revised site plans, and they do make comments on that.
Okay, so that's a great segue to my second clarification. How is it that the public is notified when there is a revision of a site plan, or there is a revision of stipulations or other compensations that has been agreed to? How does Joe Public, that isn't part of a civic group or in the know, find that information?
If you're not part of a civic group, it's going to be tough, to be honest. You know, unless you come to our office or call us up or email us for the news plan, then you're probably not going to know.
Okay. All right.
But all the information, when it is updated, is posted online. But it's going to be, it'll be difficult in order to stay on top of all that unless you are
But you don't
diligent
get
about-
notification through the notification system when it's reposted, do you? I don't think so.
I don't think it
Or
is.
maybe I ignored it. Maybe I'm ignoring
It's one
it.
notification when we initially put it up.
Right.
Because some zoning cases, the plan may change 6 times before it gets to the hearing.
That's my point. I was just trying to be kind and not pointing that out, that it's a shortfall.
We'll take a look at that.
It is a big shortfall for Joe Public. And I'm sorry to be a bogart of time, but just last but not least, can you clarify what Commissioner Burrell said about during the development process on code enforcement? Because I think it's very unclear on your website as to how you file a complaint on enforcement on a ongoing development, i.e. silt fences down, runoff, et cetera, you kind of get the runaround, and an awful lot of people go to code enforcement and file a complaint. Then they never get a response because it isn't their
If we're
job.
talking about a development issue on an existing development, I would recommend calling our office, because a lot of times
Planning though, right, not the building permit department?
this
because-
would be the Development Inspections Division. So I would just recommend we will get you to the right people. I'd recommend calling the director's office, my office, and we will make sure the information gets to the right group, because particularly if you're talking about something like a silt fence is not up. The last thing we want to have happen is we went and inspected the site on our usual inspections, and it fell after we had gone out and inspected, and the next thing you know, we have a day of rain. The last thing we want is for that silt to get off into our creeks and rivers. So we want to hear about it. So if you do see a construction-related issue that you think might want to get looked at, please call the main office for community development, and we will make sure it gets directed to the right people who can handle that.
Yeah, I think that'd be important for you to add to the website, whether it be under planning, under stormwater, under whatever, because it isn't clear. So just a suggestion.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Yeah, and also, you can always email your commissioner or whatever district it's in. I know we have had that issue on Wesley Chapel in the past on a development that's been approved, so I'm not talking about a specific upcoming case. But, and once it's reported to my office, you know, we send it over to building permits and inspections, and one of our officers goes out and makes sure they're in compliance. So you can call them directly, or you can come through the district commissioner, and we'll get it taken care of, but thanks.
A general rule of thumb, though, is if there's construction happening on the site, you'll want to call development inspections. If it's already built and your neighbor is just kind of messy, you'll want to call code enforcement.
I wanted to thank Joanne, Dana, John, and Inger, and also Christy for all of your work keeping Cobb County a great place to live. Thank you for putting this together. I know it takes a lot of work to do it. My question has to do with the code or the ordinance having to do with non-supportive RSL. And staff did an excellent job preparing for the planning committee report on some of these. But my question is, in section 134.203, paragraph 11N, it says that any RSL non-supportive residential units must be located along an arterial roadway as defined by the Cobb County Major Thoroughfare Plan, as may be amended from time to time. It appears that language was being disregarded, and I'm trying to get clarification on what this means.
With that particular code section, the board did change that a year or so ago, but the problem with our code, it's so thick and complicated that there's sections that are repeated in different parts of the code. And the part you're talking about, I think, is at the front, where they have brief descriptions of every single category, and that one did not get changed. But the board did change that to be on collector roads. If you read the main RSL section, that's where they changed it. So we're going to fix that in February when the code amendments come about. But the board's intent did change that to collectors, and that was just something that was missed when they did the amendment.
And that was about 2 years ago when the board changed direction on that particular code section, and they altered it to be a arterial road versus a collector road, if I'm not mistaken.
But should we apply a new intent when it's not written into the ordinance yet?
It is written in the ordinance, sir.
But this was provided just a few minutes ago.
Sir, that is a general description portion of it, but in the actual details that lay out the specific regulations in the specific segments of the RSL, it was changed in that particular portion, sir.
Dana, not to be argumentative, these are the specifics. The general detail section was the one that got changed. The specifics did not.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Lynn Hicks, and I too thank you very much for coming here tonight. The first question I have is very, I think, easy. Where do we find online what designation the streets are? You know, if I want to find out, I know what Ebenezer Road is, but if I want to find out another road in the county, what its designation is, where do I find that?
Is that on the GIS layer, on the transportation or traffic?
Yes, sir, it is.
It seemed like there was a layer at one time, Lynn, where you would hit transportation, and then what you could do is pull up the roadway classification and get traffic counts also. And hopefully that's still online.
Who is in case I can't find it, who is the person I should call for assistance with that?
Just call my office.
Called you, John, thank you.
And if we can, it should be on GIS, and if it's not, we'll get with the Department of Transportation and see if we can get that back up there, because that's a very important piece of information.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
And Dana, I wanted you to quote something for me. What did you say about a zoning change? I think you said, I did write down better off after the change than before. Do you remember exactly what you said, where you
Yeah.
said better off?
Well, you know, the general part of the negotiations.
The general what?
The general negotiations of what we're trying to get to is we're trying to make sure that the community is better off after the decisions get made than the conditions where they are beforehand. And that's in general, what the aspirations of what we're trying to do are.
So again, what you're saying is we would like for, if the zoning has changed, we would aspire for that property to be better off than it was before the change.
And that, yes, ma'am. And there's a lot of different ways to define that too, because it could be, there's a lot of times when difficult decisions have to get made.
Yes.
It could be something as, I'll use a waste transfer station, a use that nobody wants near their property. But it's also a use where if we don't have a waste transfer station, we're not going to be able to pick up our trash.
And I know I'm
So-
interrupting you. Could you maybe limit it to residential, since that is not my concern?
Well, I understand that, but I'm trying to give a description of when you're talking about an area is better off, you have to think about all aspects of the community and all needs of the community within it. If we can't take care of our trash, we're going to have trash piled up, and then we're going to have issues with trash being piled up. So that's something that gets taken into consideration when decisions get made. And if we don't handle stuff like trash, then we end up not being better off as an overall community. Now, do I think that we need to have a waste transfer station in every single roadway in Cobb County? No, I don't think that. But those are kind of the thoughts and decisions and what goes into the overall picture of making decisions on land use. Commissioner.
Yes, Joanne?
Let me go back to my first zoning case. It was Johnson Ferry and Post Oak Tritt, C5. But Post Oak Tritt and Holly Springs, I think, is a good example of what your question and what Dana was trying to explain. When that came in for zoning, it's at the corner of Post Oak Tritt and Holly Springs, Mabry Manor. They came in asking for, I think, 92 lots or 90-some lots, which was very dense, way too dense. So it was zoned R20. They asked for R15. Well, they asked for a combination of RA5 and R15 initially. And we got them to R15 for everything. And it was zoned R20, which allowed for 60 lots on that acreage. By coming through zoning and asking for R15, we maxed them out at 64 lots, which is just 4 lots over and above what it could have stayed at as R20 and not gone through zoning, but we wouldn't have gotten any conditions and stipulations on the property. So to me, that was better off than,
Yeah,
you know,
between
a straight
R20 and
R20.
R15, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so.
Okay. And my last question that I think is very short is, on an RSL, does the buffer count into, and I think somebody else kind of mentioned that earlier, does the buffer area count as their open or green space for part of the RSL stipulation they have to have
It depends.
on?
It depends on their site plan and how it's laid out. We would have to look at it to see how the site is laid out. Is the buffer area an area that would be plausible for passive recreation? If it's an area that would be plausible for passive recreation, then yes, it's something that could be considered. If it's something that is not contained as part of the whole thing, you know, that might not be the same answer, ma'am.
But you might suggest that passive recreation would be a criteria.
Ma'am, I would have to look at the specifics of the case that's being brought forward in order to answer a specific question.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Hi, thank you for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
We
ma'am.
love learning a few things. We're hearing a lot of feedback in our neighborhood from realtors and it's on non-valid items that are not considered code violations, such as rows of corn in the front yard, sheets of lattice work missing, panels missing, seedlings growing out of gutters. We filed all those, comes back non-valid. We can't do anything about it. Can we strengthen those codes? Because they're really hurting our home values.
Most of the times, the covenants of different communities are things that handle those particular issues.
We have no power.
And that's where it becomes difficult, is in the areas that don't have covenants.
Ours was handled improperly when he handed it over to us 28 years ago. He will not cooperate. He lives in Shanghai now. He is not going to help us. We are counting on you to help us because we're screwed.
As I think John mentioned something, I'm not saying we can or can't do
I'm
it because
sorry.
the Board of Commissioners makes the policy and makes the rules of the county. But we also have to remember that it's the rules for the entire county. And that means we have to deal with rules that handle rural parts of West Cobb where we have farms. It deals with our suburban areas of East Cobb where we have lots of subdivisions and homes. And it has to deal with very urban areas like in the Cumberland area. And unfortunately, the way that the rules work, the rules cover all of the areas. So we have to think about, I'm not saying we can or can't do it. But when policy changes are made, the commissioners think about the whole county as a whole, each one representing their particular area.
But don't you care that panels of siding are missing from a home?
Ma'am, I'm not making
just
a judgment
understand.
on it.
Well,
And
I just
the
don't understand
board,
some of these things. Of course, they're common things that we all take care of, but they're the basics that our realtors complaining about that we have no power to change.
Right, but you're also talking about private property rights that we
Yes,
can't
yes.
enforce. That's why covenants are established and they override, what we can't do, the covenants could.
We've been to
But-
attorneys, there's nothing we can do. But hope our neighbor that's doing something will take it kindly and change it.
Yeah. Well, get with Inger and
Okay.
give her your name and number
Okay.
and address and
Thank
And
you.
we'll-
Thank you. It's-
we'll see if
it's a
there's
shame
anything we
because
can help with.
We put in so much work in our own homes, but the person next door can totally ruin it. Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Hey, Dana, in the beginning, you talked about zoning and then planning, and there's two different, one's real clear and specific, the other's kind of a long-term view. And there's a lot of information on the website. Is the planning information there about the vision and the longer-term view?
Absolutely, and I'll say this in two ways. One, that's all contained in the document called the Comprehensive Plan.
At the .org website?
That's correct. Or you could just Google Cobb County Comprehensive Plan, it'll take you right there. And that comprehensive plan is a little bit thinner than the zoning ordinance, but not quite much. And that kind of looks at, again, the long-term vision of Cobb County. One thing I'll mention is that the planning staff is in the process of updating the comprehensive plan. By state law, we have to do minor updates every 5 years and major updates every 10 years. We're in the middle of our major update to our comprehensive plan. So there will be information coming out shortly from the planning department about the third round of public hearings that we're having and public meetings that we're having on the comprehensive plan. And I would encourage everybody to come out and participate and get involved.
Okay, good feedback. Good evening. Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, sir.
Well, thank all of you guys working in my municipality. I know how hard you guys work in dealing with the same folks in our group. So two quick questions. One is to clarify, because I'm going to be looking for rezoning on my own property. The 1,000 feet, where does that come from? Because I want to be able to talk to all my neighbors first and know, is that from every border of my property in 1,000
It's from
straight
all-
line direction?
Yeah, it's for the entire perimeter of your property out 1,000 feet.
Great.
And there's actually software on the county website that you can use to get that mailing list.
Right.
So it's really easy to get, and it actually creates your mailing list for you.
Cool. That one was easy. And then the other one is, have already missed the window in getting through a zoning this year?
No.
Or is
Our
there,
next
is there
last
one in
filing date
December?
is the first, our next last filing date that you can make a date for this year would be the first Thursday in October. We'd get you on the December hearing dates.
Awesome. That's all I needed to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo the thanks for, this is a good presentation. A couple of questions. The buffer mentioned that fencing is part of, can be part of the buffer. Is there anything about treated wood fencing? I see so much sagging, split, falling down treated wood all over the county. And has treated wood quality gone down, or is it something that can be addressed? Because it really looks terrible. Just a question.
It would be something we'd have to look at, sir.
Yeah, and sometimes in zoning conditions, it's specified as to what the fence is. You know, sometimes it's pressure treated and sometimes it's cedar. Or sometimes it may be a black vinyl chain link fence. But it does vary.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing about a fence is the fence looks the best the day it goes up. And then after that, you got to maintain it, maintain it, maintain it.
Yeah. Okay. And this other question, when we do put in a request for a code visit to enforcement to somebody, how long does it take before somebody responds? And then if the person doesn't respond, what happens? And kind of the timeline type question this gentleman asked.
It's difficult to give it a specific timeline because based upon our code, different types of violations have different timelines attached to them. Generally speaking, if a code complaint is made, we try to, within 7 days, get out and visit the site to see and review the code complaint that's there. While we're there, if there are other code complaints that we see, we will also incorporate those into the citation, into the notice, if there is other issues there. So, say for instance, we get called out because of grass being too high. As we're out there looking at the grass, if we see outdoor storage strewn across the whole place and gutters falling off the building, we will probably cite them for all of the code violations that we see while we're there. Again, depending on the type of violation, is a different time frame. Most of the violations have a 10-day time frame for them to come into compliance. Grass has a 2-week time frame to come into compliance. The reason for that is because rain, vacations, things like that, to make it really difficult sometimes if you're working a 9-to-5 job to get out and mow there and you just had 5 days of rain, you're automatically in violation. So we give people 2 weeks to fix their grass issues and generally 10 days to fix other issues. The way our software works is it's instantaneous. So when the code enforcement officer's out there and they see a violation and they type in the violation in their car that says what they found, the system is automatically updated. So if you were behind the code enforcement officer and you checked right after they put their stuff in, you would see instantaneously exactly all the information they put up there.
And do we check by address? How do we check?
If you put in the code complaint online, you will get that case number, and that case number is the number that you'll use to go back and verify if you did it anonymously. If you did it, if you put your name in there with your email address, you'll receive an email saying what the status of the complaint once a status change has been made.
Can you put in a name of an association into that to register that way? To have the person's name?
As long as there's an email address and a name, I don't see
'Cause we
why
have
that
some
wouldn't be
contact.
allowable.
Yeah, okay. And then what if you have repeat offenders? Because with us, things tend to go into a black hole, and there's a lot of repeat offenders that just, they get a citation, they pay a fine, and then they do it again.
So yeah, let's take a good example of parking on the grass. Let's say someone has a habitual grass parker, and the person's been cited once. They've given a notice and they fixed it one time. They did it again. We go out and we cite them, and they don't fix it this time, and they actually go to magistrate court. If we keep on seeing a repeat offender and they keep on doing the same thing over and over again, we will stop giving the notices and giving them a warning about it because they're aware of the code, and we will just give them a citation to court.
And if they're guilty of the citation and they...
So let's take it a step further. That's a good, I never kind of went there, what happens after a citation is issued. So a citation is issued because of parking on the grass, let's say. Once that citation is issued, it is out of Cobb government's hands as those that report to the Board of Commissioners, and then it becomes a judicial issue. Once that citation is issued, it's in the hands of a judge, particularly the magistrate court judge. So then it goes into their queue, and they will assign a date for that particular citation, and they'll let people know when that particular court date will be, just like a regular court hearing is. Just like a regular court hearing, the code enforcement officer for that case will have to be there. A solicitor will get that case. A solicitor will read it in front of the judge. A lot of things can happen once it hits the courts, because then it goes into the regular court proceedings. So they could pay a fine. They could hear the case in front of the magistrate court judge. The particular person who received the citation could say, I want to have a court case in front of my peers, at which case they'll ask for it to get transferred to state court. So there's lots of things that could happen once it gets into the court system process, and that's all under the guise of the state law as it relates to courts and citations and misdemeanors. So it's not an easy answer, but that's the best I can give you.
Yeah, if they pay a fine, is it typically a fine if they're found, is it guilty? I don't even know what the
It would be
term is.
considered, if you're violating a code, one of our codes, it is a misdemeanor unless it's a criminal offense, which usually parking in your grass is not going to be a criminal offense. It'll be a misdemeanor. So it'll be under the guise of the misdemeanors, which is generally speaking a fine up to $1,000 and not to exceed $1,000.
And, I mean, is it usually that high, or?
No.
Depends on the number of violations you
There's
received.
tiers to it.
Like,
depending
what's the first, roughly?
on- what, $133 for the first one, $300, then $1,000?
Approximately.
Like that?
And
It
it-
does escalate as the number of offenses increases.
Correct. So if you're a repeat offender, you go in the first time, you'll pay a low fine. Your second time will be more, third time will be more. Eventually, it'll be up to $1,000. And if you mouth off to the judge, it'll be $1,000 the first time.
Right. Okay, thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for putting on a seminar. I wish this had happened 3 months ago. I won't mention any specific cases. My question is around stipulation letters. And I'll use the example of the commission hearing, Planning Commission hearing this past Thursday. The developer's representative was talking about the stipulation letter that he had turned into Cobb County on the 22nd of August. How do I get, that was never posted to my knowledge on your analysis online. So I'm trying to figure out what the process is for the stipulation letters. Once they're turned in, do they always get posted? And I know the commissioners asked for some additional stipulations or modifications. And do those modifications get posted online? How do we make sure that the public who's affected by them, interested in them, can see them?
Okay, as far as the planning commission modifications to a letter that's read into a motion, that's kept on the clerk's website once the minutes get adopted, so you can see those. Usually about a week after the hearing, you can see what the PC actually approved through the county clerk's office. You know, the first part of your question regarding revised letters is we don't post those online. We post the initial case, and that's it. You know, if you want to see a revised letter, you need to call us or email us, and we'll send it to you or make a copy for you. That's why you need to call the office or email.
It sure seems a lot easier if you'd post it on website, because
It
there are a
seems
lot
like
of people
it
that are
would, sir.
interested in it. And
It seems
if
like it
you have
would.
15 people calling your office, that chews up a lot of staff time.
Well, you know, the thing about that is you're probably spending 100% of your time on this one case, but for this hearing that we just went through, we had 47 pieces of business that we had to keep up with. So it's pretty hard keeping up with that, plus keeping up with the cases we're working on in October, plus all the variance cases though. I mean, when you're talking about that, you're over 100 cases.
But again, going back to my comment, I was here for one specific case. I was interested in the stipulation letters from some of the other cases, but I hadn't been able to see them unless I'd have come to your office or done something in advance. And if they'd have been posted online, I'd have been able to read them ahead of time, and if I had questions, I could have brought them up at that point in time. But thank you.
I'll just add, the best way to get that a lot of times is to be in constant communication with the applicant. Because if typically on a bigger case they have an attorney, that attorney will keep a list of all the people who want revised letters, and he'll send it out to everybody when they send them, typically, not always, but that's a good way to keep on top of it.
And
He
also,
didn't even notify us of the change in the hearing date.
and communication is an important part of the process, whether that's communication with the applicant, communication with the commissioner, communication with staff. We'll all guide you the best way we can to make sure we get the most up-to-date information out there. We are going to take more questions, but I have to make an announcement. It is 6:59 right now. That means they're about to stop the live broadcast of Zoning 101. So for those who aren't here in the room and are watching on TV or watching later on YouTube or some other method, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit about the zoning process. And Commissioner, do you want to do a wrap? We'll take the rest of the questions here, but Commissioner, do you want to do a wrap up for our live version?
Yes. Thank you, Dana. I would just like to thank all of you for coming tonight, for getting involved and participating, especially in the zoning process in your community. I'd like to thank staff. We couldn't do any of this without staff putting it all together and coordinating it for you. Cornelius, TV23, for recording this, and it will be online later for you to view. For those at home that are watching, we thank you for tuning in, and it will be available online probably by the end of the week. Yes. Thank you.